Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 6 and we want to present our discussion about plot and structure. Before we start, we want to introduce our group member. So the first one is me, Meisya Putri Anandita, and the second one is Tharra, Azkia, Darmawan, and the third one is Bunga, Melssa, Maurelia. And I also want to introduce the contents of our presentation. The first is plot, the motivation and causation of narratives and plays. The third is writing about the plot of a story or play. The third is the structure of narratives and drama. The fourth is formal categories of structure. The fifth is formal and actual structure. And the last one is writing about structure in narratives and drama. And the first content will be presented by Bunga. So Bunga, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Acha. So let's get started with the first topic, plot, the motivation and causation of narrative and plays. Next slide, please. Okay, by one of E.M. Forster's essays, titled Aspects of the Novel, present a memorable illustration of plot to show that motivation and causation enter the sequence to form a plot. It can be said that plot is formed because effects follow causes. Next slide, please. Causes and effects are controlled by one element that is called conflict. Conflict refers to people or circumstances that a character must face and try to overcome. In its most elemental form, a conflict is the opposition of two people, but also may exist between groups. Conflicts may also abstract. It can be said to be an internal conflict that occurs inside of the character and may make the character into a dilemma as a natural conflict for an individual person. Conflict is directly related to doubt, tension, and interest. Moreover, conflict is the major element of plot because processes arouse curiosity, cause doubt, create tension, and produce interest. Next slide, please. The second topic is writing about the plot of a story or play. There are two steps to making plot essay. The first is discovering ideas. Make some questions. You can start from the important elements of the conflict, such as determine the major and minor characters and their problems. And the second is organizing ideas. Be selective. Rather than describe everything a major character does, try to stress the major elements in his or her conflict. Plot may be analyzed more broadly in terms of impulsive goals, issues, values, and historical perspective. The conclusion may contain a brief of summary of the points made. It's also a fitting location to consider the effector impact produced by the conflict.
Okay, I'll continue with the structures of narratives and drama. Next slide, please. The structure. Structure refers to the ways in which writers arrange materials in accord with the general ideas and purposes of their works, while plot is concerned with conflict or conflict. Structure defines the layout of works, the ways the story, play, or poem is shaped. Structure is about matters such as placement, balance, recurring themes, true or misleading conclusions, suspense, and the imitation of models or forms such as reports, letters, conversations, or confessions. Next slide, please. Now it's about formal categories of structure. Next slide, please. A pattern of story development. First is exposition. The exposition provides materials necessary to put the plot into operation. Exposition is laying out, the putting forth, the materials in the story, the main characters, their backgrounds, their characteristics, interests, goals, limitations, potentials, and basic assumptions. Second is complication. The complication marks the beginning and growth of the conflict. The complication is the onset and development of the measure, the plot. Next slide, please. A pattern. Next pattern is crisis. The crisis mark the decisions made to end the conflict. The crisis, from Greek, is meant turning point, marks that part of the action where the conflict reached greatest tension. Fourth is the climax. The conclusion of the climax is conflict. The climax, from Greek, means ladder, is consequence of the crisis. Is the story's high point and may take the shape of the decision, a nation, an affirmation or a denial, or an illumination or a realization. In most stories, the climax is occurs at the end or close to it. Next slide, please. The last is resolution or denouement. The resolution finishes the work and releases the tension. The resolutions or a releasing or an untying or denouement or untying is the completing of the story or play after climax. For once the climax has occurred, the work's tension and uncertainty are finished, and most authors conclude quickly to avoid losing their readers' interest. In other words, after the story's major conflict are finished, the job of the denouement is to bring things to a satisfying and rapid ending.
So the fifth topic is formal and actual structure. A formal structure is an ideal pattern that moves directly from the beginning to end, usually used by several mystery stories because it holds back the crucial details to mystify the story. The suspense story leaves the protagonist clueless, but gives the reader plenty of details to maximize attention and suspense about the outcome. Actual structure is more realistic and contains structural variation. For example, is The Three Stranger by Hardy. In the last part, Hardy raises suspicion to the fugitive prisoner that he is the third stranger. Then finally, at the end of the story, he explained that the fugitive prisoner is not third stranger. The complication creates and highlight a new perspective of the first stranger position as both righteous and brave. There are many other possible variants in structure. One of these is flashback or selective recollection, which present circumstances of the past event. The moment at which the flashback is introduced may be a part of resolution of the plot, and the flashback might lead you into a movement of climax, but then go from there to develop the details that are more properly part of the exposition. A technique like selective recollection permits a unique narrative that departs significantly from a strictly formal and chronological structural pattern. The possible variation in structuring literary works are almost literally infinite. The sixth topic is writing about structure in narratives and drama. So the first step is to raise questions to discover ideas. The second is organize the essay about structure. So the structure is introduction. In introduction, the essay should show why an entire narrative arranged the way it is to reveal the nature of the character situation. The second is body. The essay is best developed in concert or agreement with what the work contains. The location of scenes is an obvious organizing element. The third is conclusion. The conclusion should highlight the main part of the essay. It may also deal briefly with the relationship of structure to the plot. So here is the reference for our presentation. And thank you so much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.